I've been wanting to make a video like this for a really long time now. Grand Theft Auto 4 is my favorite game of all time. And I know that's kind of a heavy statement to make, but it is true. Now, let me explain why. I'll just start from the beginning, I guess. So, Grand Theft Auto 4 was a game that I was first exposed to when a friend was playing Ballad of Gay Tony, the episodes from Liberty City game. He was playing it online with some of my friends, and he basically introduced me to it. Joe and Rudy, they both introduced me to it, and as well as their friends, and I picked it up on a Steam sale. I picked up the complete edition of Grand Theft Auto 4, and I played it online with them, and it was awesome. The multiplayer for Grand Theft Auto 4 is awesome. Not that that's something that everyone doesn't already know. Everyone knows that. But we played that, and eventually I ended up playing the single player, and one of the things that led to that was I think it was either before I picked up the game or after, it was sometime around that time, shortly before or after, I saw the trailer for Grand Theft Auto 5, the first one, and the announcement and everything. And I was like, this looks cool. It looks kind of story-focused. So I played the DLC. I didn't finish it at first. I went back and finished it later. But I played Lost and Damned and Ballad of Gay Tony. And I ended up liking Lost and Damned a little more, just because I was into the whole biker gang thing and the hard rock music and all that. So then eventually I just went and installed Grand Theft Auto 4 proper, the vanilla game and everything. And I played through that, and I have to say the first time that I played through Grand Theft Auto 4, the original game, I wasn't too impressed with it. The ending was rather monotone, kind of anticlimactic when I first played it. So it definitely wasn't my favorite game of all time when I first played it. It was just kind of like, this is good but not great. That was kind of my first impression. And by the way, for the record, I chose the revenge ending, just so that's clear. And I do blame part of why I was disappointed with the ending. I do blame on that. I also thought that the mission design was a little bit more, it was a little bit boring. I remember thinking that at the time. So then I ended up putting the game down after I finished it and didn't really think about it again for a while. And Grand Theft Auto 5 came out. I played through that, loved it, liked it more than 4 at the time. And then I saw a video by a guy that I used to watch a lot, and I still watch sometimes. It was a guy that was at the time called Arshan Gaia. His YouTube channel is now called The Lore Runner. He made a video about Grand Theft Auto 5 where he basically, it was just called a rumination analysis. That's what all of his videos are called, basically. He made a video about GTA 5. He talked about how just depressing it was, or just the whole series, but especially, 4 and 5. He was saying, it's kind of a nihilistic message. It's kind of about depression and futility, and about resignation, and just kind of accepting that there's nothing you can really do, and that as hard as you try, chances are you're just going to get lucky if your life does get better. I mean, it's just luck, like if you, most of the time it's just everyone is unlucky, most of the time you can't scrape yourself together and it's just kind of screwed, it's kind of like the broken American dream. That was kind of what he was talking about. And he's not the only one that's interpreted the game as that. I remember seeing on a Kotaku list of like top games of all time, GTA 4 was there, and they were talking about like the broken American dream, and this is what happens to immigrants and stuff. And I don't know, at the time that kind of made sense to me, and at the time it was definitely intriguing. When I heard that, I was like, man, that's like pretty intense. I gotta go and replay Grand Theft Auto 4. And I did, and I kind of came to agree with those things. This game is really dark. It's really depressing and all that stuff. But then kind of later on, I ended up viewing things a little differently. I'll get to that later, but I'll just go into the personal stuff a little bit. Part of the reason why GTA 4 is so great to me is because it has personal significance. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into that stuff because I don't know, I don't feel comfortable with it, to be perfectly honest with you, and I just don't want to sound like I'm whining, or I don't want to sound like I'm kind of going on a soapbox too much. So, the short of it, I guess, you know how when people get depressed, some people, they dive deep into to music that almost reflects that mood, you know? Like, I'm depressed, so I'm going to listen to sappy music. You know, some people do that. Some people listen to happy music. You know, they focus on the happy things to get them out of the depression. But some people just kind of sulk in that sort of sadness, that sort of depression. Grand Theft Auto 4 for me was that at a point when I was depressed. Now, I don't really get depressed too much. There's no shame in that for people that do. I understand it's hard. You know, for the short time I was depressed, it wasn't good. And it definitely woke me up as to what people actually go through. I have a lot of anxiety problems, but anxiety's not as bad as depression. At least I don't think it is. Yeah, that little taste of depression for a few months, like, that was rough. And Grand Theft Auto 4 was what I used to kind of cope with it, but the thing is that Grand Theft Auto 4 almost made my depression worse, because I went deeper into that mindset. I went deeper into that sort of, like, everything's screwed, everything's out of my control, I'm terrible because something happened, I wasn't raised properly, something messed up, and now some screw is loose, something happened to me, PTSD, something, and now I'm just screwed. I'm, you know, that kind of, and the sort of blaming of other things too, like blaming society, like, I hate society, I don't want to work, I don't want to do anything. Just to add a little bit of detail to this depression was all coming from school too. It was a big school-related thing, and I'm homeschooled too, you know, or I was. I'm out of school now. I'm like 20 years old now, but yeah, I was homeschooled, and it's like, man, school is going so poorly, yet you know, I'm homeschooled. It's like I'm at the top of privilege. Like, I should be doing well, but I'm not. That was the whole thing, and that sort of, I mean, I'm dragging this on for too long. I should have said something earlier that hey, I'll have an annotation to skip this if people want, but, you know, and I will have that annotation, by the way. I just wish I said it earlier, but, yeah, that stuff, you know, I dove deep into it, you know, while I was suffering, Niko was suffering, Packie was suffering, Dwayne was suffering. Dwayne was actually suicidal, and, you know, these characters have actually killed people and stuff. Luckily, I've never killed anyone, and I've never been suicidal, thank God. But, I just kind of sulked in how bad things were, and I used GTA 4 to kind of, I guess, cope with that, but it almost made it worse. And, you know, as time went on, you know, I went through some horrible things, and I kind of came out of it, you know, through the struggle. I did get better. You know, some bad things had to happen before I got better, you know. It's like you hit like a low, and then you come out of it. And I did, and when I did, you know, I came back to Grand Theft Auto 4, and I started to see good things in it. You know, I started to see, like, man, you know, I don't think this message that this game is saying, I don't think that it's nihilistic. I don't think it's all terrible. It could be interpreted as that. But then I kind of realized I think this game is kind of a reflection of people. I think that this game is about your light side and your dark side. I think it's about optimism and pessimism. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a pessimist. I want to make that clear from the very beginning. I'm going to be talking a lot about optimism and pessimism in this video. There are good people that are pessimists, for sure. But that struggle is very obvious in this game, and it's a struggle that I've had in life. So, yeah, so with that pretty much sums up my thoughts. I came back and kind of had that revelation that this game is not all darkness. I think that this game has a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't think that the message is necessarily bad. So then when I realized that, you know, it kind of became my favorite game, or at least my favorite story. And gameplay-wise, I mean, I had mentioned that the game wasn't really a coping mechanism, like as far as like, I mean, it helped me cope, but it kind of made things worse in a way. The story made things worse, but you know, I have to admit the gameplay made things better. You know, when I would have like a bad day and I would load up Grand Theft Auto 4 and mess around, you know, it definitely made me feel better. So with that out of the way, let's start walking. This is a walk through of Grand Theft Auto 4. So we're gonna start walking. We're gonna walk through this game. By the way, that is Vlad's bar. Just so you know, we'll talk about Vlad in a second. And we'll start walking in just a second here. But I'm gonna go down the list here and start talking about the story. I have a script here that I wrote, sort of. And I'm gonna just basically go down the list of what happens in the story leading up to a certain point. And then from there, I'm gonna branch off and talk about the other characters and the themes and all that. There's a lot to cover in this game. I'm not going to go down the list of everything that happens in the story, because I think it would be kind of boring. And it's also kind of confusing, too. Like, all the stuff with the diamonds and the heroin, all that stuff. Alright, so, let's get started here. So, the first thing I want to say is that this game's intro reminds me of Metal Gear Solid 2. Of all things. It's sort of a bait and switch. And what I mean by that is that the game kind of presented itself as silly. And I know with Metal Gear Solid 2, you had a bait and switch that was on the level of like literally misleading marketing. Like the marketing was showing Snake, you know, you play as Snake the whole game. When, you know, it wasn't that, you actually play as Raiden. They showed very little of Raiden. This game, you know, in the marketing and in the trailers and all that, they showed that this game was going to be more serious than Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas. So you knew that going in. Now, for me, I didn't really know that too much. I knew that it was a little bit more serious than what it was, but I still kind of wrote this game off as kind of typical gangster music video, immature simulator, you know, middle school, you know, just kind of the ridiculous thing. I thought it was going to kind of be that. And boy, was I wrong. So the intro to this game kind of sets that up. It's the bait and switch. They play up the comedy a lot, only to reveal the serious nature of the story later. Now, the best example of this I can think of is literally the daddy's back bitches moment in the intro, where the guy is getting whipped by a woman and is screaming, "Daddy's back," and then Niko knocks on the door, and he's like, "Dave is not coming," and, you know, he doesn't, and then they walk off, and then the game actually starts with the story, and the music starts playing and everything. It's really out of left field, and I thought I was in for an interesting game after seeing that, and I think that setup is definitely part of that bait and switch. And it's also one of those things where the bait and switch not only applies to the player, it applies to Niko Bellic as a character too, because he is coming to this country expecting everything to be handed to him by Roman, you know, that he's going to have all, you know, he has these kind of grandiose views of what things are going to be, you know, like, you know, his cousin is going to give him like the houses and the cars and the women and all that stuff. You know, and that's just kind of immature and kind of stupid. So he's disappointed when he shows up and, you know, he gets to the apartment and it's pretty bad. And that, I think that is definitely reflected with the player too. Though, of course, it's a case-by-case basis. It's not true with everyone. So then, basically in the intro you see heroin being loaded into a car, as well as diamonds being cooked into the cake, so that those little seeds there are planted, almost literally, in the cake there, to start the story, and that becomes a huge deal with the Mafia later. They talk about it being a land of opportunity. You know, Niko talks about the houses and the cars and the women and stuff. And then Niko says, you know, he talks about how he had done a lot of shady things, and, you know, he's going to come here and he's going to forget. And he said, you know, he did some dumb things, and Niko's friend on the boat, I forget his name, but he says, we all do dumb things. That's what makes us human. And Niko responds with, could be. Could be, you know, like, maybe. And then we see the title, Grand Theft Auto 4. And I think that that's beautiful. I think that's a great way to start the game, because we all do dumb things. That's what makes us human. Is that what makes us human? Is our dumb things what makes us human? Is it the bad things that makes us human? Or is it the good things? What is it? That question is interesting. The dumb things are what make us human. And Niko responds with, maybe. Maybe not. Maybe yes, maybe no. And then we see the title, and I think that's perfect. So then Roman shows up, drunk driving, and you end up having to drive him home to the apartment. And of course, to Niko's disappointment, the American dream he had in his mind wasn't real. In fact, they literally say that in the game, word for word. The American dream is a dream in your head, not reality. So then he works with his cousin, and is introduced to Vlad and Mallory. You discover Roman's gambling addiction as well. You see the general backstory of these characters involving the war and everything. They talk about that a little bit. I'll talk more about that later, probably. Almost certainly. Roman's debt becomes a real issue when loan sharks actually show up at the cab business and vandalize him, or vandalize his business. They vandalize his computer. You know, they throw it on the ground. They threaten him with a knife. And there's a great moment where Roman says, he's not my cousin, he's my loan shark, when they're threatening to hurt Niko. And when I first played this game, that was something that I thought meant that Roman was somehow ashamed of Niko. Like, he's not my cousin, he's my loan shark, almost like he's just my tool. You know, I thought that that was a dick move by Roman at first when he refers to you as the loan shark. But, you know, on replays, I kind of realized he's saying that to protect Niko. It's out of respect for Niko that he's saying that he's not my friend, he's my loan shark. At least that's how I interpret it on replay. Because that's what the Mafia people do. You know, they target the people you care about. And so, and you know, loan sharks can be paid off, they can be bought. So, I think that that's a really interesting thing there in the beginning. And I think it says something about Roman's intelligence. Though, I think Roman, even though he's not very smart, he's portrayed as smarter than Niko in certain instances, but that's definitely not portrayed in the intro. And that was done on purpose because they wanted character development. They wanted Niko to be presented as the relatable one and Roman to be presented as the annoying one in the beginning. And Roman kind of always stays a little bit annoying, and Niko always stays a little bit relatable as far as like being the player character. But things do shift, and Niko becomes more wrong as the game progresses, and Roman becomes more correct as the game progresses, because, you know, Niko's the one with his head up his ass, Roman is the one that's telling him to fix his life. So, after we're introduced to the gambling addiction, and, you know, Roman's debt and everything, and the loan sharks, Niko decides to take a stand. You know, he takes matters into his own hands. He takes on the loan sharks. He beats them up. And you even have the option to kill one of them at the end too, though it's optional, so you don't have to. And then when you get back to the cab depot, Roman tells Vlad the story of Niko beating up the loan sharks, and this gets Vlad's attention. So Niko also ends up dating a girl named Michelle at that point. So a bunch of these things happen at that point. A lot of things happen. The only thing I have to say about Michelle, I think that the twist with her is a little bit too obvious. And by the way, just so you guys know, full spoilers here. I'm going to be talking about spoilers for Grand Theft Auto 4, obviously, and maybe even a few of the other games, though I'm not sure. If I do spoil anything, I'll probably be spoiling 5. Not really the PS2 games so much, maybe. So, Michelle is introduced. I think that the twist with her is a little bit too obvious, with her being an agent for the FBI or the CIA, I forget. I think, yeah, just in retrospect, she asks too many questions like, oh, are you involved in organized crime, Niko? Like, is Roman involved in organized crime? It's a little bit too obvious. But, weirdly enough, at the time, I did not like, I'm saying it's obvious now, but that's because I know. At the time, I still didn't really realize it, so... I don't know. That's kind of a tough thing to judge. Definitely a tough call there. I'd have to ask other people, you know, people that hadn't played the game and, you know, just came in fresh. So, I had mentioned that it got Vlad's attention. You can visually see Niko actually being upset about that. You can see him basically kind of groaning and like just being like, oh no, I got Vlad's attention. Because Niko knows Vlad is not a good guy, and Vlad will use people like Niko as a means to an end. Because people like Niko are useful to people like Vlad, these spineless wimps that love to order people around and have a big mouth, but they don't have the guts. Niko has the guts. So that's why that's very problematic to Niko. Also, another thing, Mallory sets them up to date each other. Mallory sets up Michelle and Niko to date, and Mallory actually sets up Niko with Elisabetta later too, and Manny, who also get him into trouble. All the characters that Mallory sets Niko up with get him into trouble, which is very interesting. I think it's just, if I had anything to blame for that, I think it's just because Mallory's upbringing was kind of rough. She grew up in South Bohan, also known as South Bronx in real life, and that background was kind of rough for her, so she doesn't have the best of friends, and that her friends aren't great influences on her. So, then you end up working with Vlad, as you saw at the bar here, at Comrade's bar. You end up working for him there. You end up also working for the Jamaican named Little Jacob, a totally new dude that you meet during one of Roman's cab missions. He hands Niko a gun at a certain mission and basically tells Niko to cover him, or asks Niko to cover him. Niko doesn't have any problem with that. They're going to do a drug deal, and the drug deal does not go so well, and Niko ends up killing 4 people. He executes his first kills. And after killing those 4 people, Niko was rewarded with $150. Now, this becomes important later on. I'll bring it up again later, for sure. But, yeah. Just keep that in your mind. $150 for killing 4 people. So, in the first Vlad mission, you briefly see him talking to a guy named Ivan, which becomes a little bit important later. He shows up later. And your first mission with Vlad is to intimidate other people that owe him money, that are set up around Broker, or Brooklyn, if you prefer. Showing that Roman is not the only one that owes Vlad money, and that he's been harassing a bunch of people that live in the Broker area. Eventually, Vlad tells you to kill Ivan, a drinking buddy that he talked to earlier. The same guy that I just mentioned. You can either kill him or not kill him, which is the first choice that you have in the game, which becomes very important later. This game is all about choices, and they matter. They affect the game later on, which is awesome. If you decide to keep him alive, he will show up later in Alderney City with a short mission, and he's doing better, though, like, he's kind of more like Roman, his head's up his ass a little bit. So then there's a cutscene where we get to see Vlad act basically at his most gross, even worse than usual, and that says something, because he's pretty bad. He disrespects homeless people in the street, like he just randomly steps out against them and yells at them, treats Niko even worse. He calls him a fucking yokel and says his, peasant family is worthless, basically. He just craps on his family, craps on Roman. And he also mentions doing coke, and he does coke. And when he's doing coke, he mentions that there's a laxative in it, and it's giving him stomach problems. And that reference, I don't know, I find that interesting, because that is, cocaine has been in Grand Theft Auto before, but it's never been, it's always been there, but it's never been shown as an awful thing. Just that little reference that it makes you have stomach problems. It's a small detail, but I think it's actually pretty important, because it shows that this game is definitely darker, it's definitely weightier than the other Grand Theft Autos. And it's just a little tiny detail. He also references that he has powerful friends, which you don't know for sure at the time. He could just be all talk at the time. You don't know that for sure. But he mentions Mikhail Faustin, who we will find out about later for sure. He is probably the worst monster in this entire game, if you ask me. He is. So then, we definitely see this annoying Niko. All this stuff definitely bothers him. He threatens to fuck up his car that he makes you steal. But what really pushes Niko over the edge is when Vlad references having sex with Mallory, Roman's girlfriend. Which I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention that Mallory was the girlfriend. So this pushes Niko to a total breaking point. He decides to kill Vlad in front of Roman. And go to his bar and really mess with him before he kills them. So with that, they get the attention of Mikhail Faustin and Dmitri Raskolov. Niko and Roman both get kidnapped. Roman is hiding in like a dumpster and gets kidnapped. Niko wakes up in Mikhail's basement with a literal slap in the face from Dmitri. A perfect way to introduce Dmitri as a character. He threatens to... one of the men of Faustin threatens to cut off Niko's arm. And there's a lot of screaming. Roman is screaming. And this triggers Mikhail to come down the stairs and basically say, you know, the screaming is bothering my wife. What is wrong? And he basically kills his own guy. Faustin just shoots his own guy. And shoots Roman, too. So that's a good way to show how unhinged he is from the very beginning. And with that, you do your first missions with him. The first mission is to steal some TVs, which I really like as a mission because it shows kind of the groundedness of this game. You know, it's more down to earth. It's definitely one of the few missions where I really feel like a criminal in the game. You know, if you're just checking TV vans, or you're just checking vans for TVs and electronics to steal, it's very real life. And then after that, we get to see Mikhail and Dimitri's relationship, where Mikhail is kind of the pusher, and Dimitri is the negotiator. Mikhail says it. He says it himself. He says, when we need to push people, it's me, all alone. Dimitri is the negotiator. And that's a very important point, because Dimitri has his limits. And so they show Mikhail's abusive relationship with his entire family. You kill his daughter's boyfriend for him. And you see him verbally abuse his wife. Say things like, I'll fucking kill you. Someday I'll crucify you in hell. Things like that. Mikhail forced Niko to kill a friend of Dimitri. And the relative of Kenny Petrovic, I think it's his son or his cousin, something like that. At the train station, you're just forced to shoot him right there. And Dimitri shows his disagreement with that. And Niko is just kind of the guy following orders, so he just does it. And then there's a cutscene. One of the most important ones, I'd say. This cutscene, at least in my opinion, marks the point where this game doesn't really hold back anymore. It just kind of goes forward from here. The bait and switch thing, it definitely comes into full force here. Yeah, it goes fully unhinged. So, let me find my thing here. I have the quote. I have the full thing here. Okay, so Niko shows up at the door. Mikhail's wife answers. She tells him to come in. They both sit down and they talk about religion, actually, of all things. They talk about, you know, faith and their souls. Niko says a really iconic line, one that was even used in the first trailer of the game. I've killed people, smuggled people, sold people. And she says, don't you worry about your soul? And he responds by saying, and the camera even zooms in when this happens, so they're not very subtle about this. It's a very blunt line here. After you walk into a village, and you see 50 children, all sitting neatly in a row against the church wall, each with their throats cut and their hands chopped off, you realize that the creature that could do this doesn't have a soul. So that, right there, shows what Niko is. Niko is a man that has lost his soul. And that's the beautiful thing about that. Niko was destroyed by a war. Now, they make this clear earlier on, but they really hammer that point in there. And she says, "You must not give up hope." And then, at that very moment, Mikhail comes barging in, throws her favorite tea kettle, some historical thing with her family. He throws it right on the floor, yells at her, and she runs out crying. And then Mikhail tells you to do a mission that's basically the last straw for Niko. Mikhail tells Niko to go into this truck and drive to South Bohan. The truck is rigged with explosives, and Mikhail doesn't tell him until he's in the car. And now Niko is driving around town, sitting on an atom bomb, as he put it, in his own words. You blow it up at the garage in Bohan and kill civilians. Niko was forced to kill civilians for the first time in the game. And maybe the only time. I don't really remember, to be honest. It's definitely one of the few times. Niko kills Faustin, basically, at that point. Calls Faustin. Misread that. And tells him to... And he does kill Faustin, eventually. And tells him to never do that again. Basically, he's done. Like, Niko tells Faustin, "I do not want to drive with an atom bomb. Do not ever make me do that again." So Niko draws the line there, and Faustin responds by calling him a pussy. And he basically says, like, "You pussy." Like, he says it in a very condescending voice. Then Dimitri calls for a meeting with Niko. Or texts him, something like that. So they sit down at the boardwalk together, and Dimitri says to Niko, "You're presented with a choice. Kill your best friend or die. What do you do?" And Niko says, "You don't have any family. You could run." But Niko quickly realizes that it's not an option to run. Not for people like Dimitri. So Dimitri reveals to Niko that if Niko kills Faustin, he's free. But if he doesn't, he will die. Niko laughs, ironically, and says, "So that's the way it is." And Dimitri says, "Yes, that's the way it is. You can pick the game, Niko Bellic, but you cannot change the rules. See you later." And Niko kills Faustin, as Faustin screams about the American greed taking everyone, and how only he's right. He's stubborn. I hate to say this, but I think there are similarities between Niko and Faustin. And I think there's similarities with Faustin and all the characters in many ways. It all comes back to the same mindset, blaming everyone and everything but themselves. It's funny, Faustin even looks like Niko a little bit. Same hair, similar facial structure, like their ears are even similar. Then Dimitri betrays Niko, and if little Jacob didn't have Niko's back, Niko would have been killed by Dimitri's new partner, Ray Bulgarin. Ray Bulgarin is interesting. I mean, he doesn't really show up much in GTA 4. I believe he only makes 2 appearances in the game. But he's the source of all the madness with the diamonds and the H, or at least that's what's speculated. He's after it all, and Niko's backstory is very interesting with Ray. Everything involving Niko on the ship in the Mediterranean and its sinking, leaving Niko lost at sea, and he had to swim all the way to Italy, which is just crazy. That's like some World War II, crashed in the Pacific stuff right there. So it just shows what this man has been through for the past however many years, like 15 years. So then, after Niko survived the trap, he's reunited with Roman, only to discover that Roman's business and his apartment were burnt to the ground by Dimitri's men. Roman also says that he was going to propose to Mallory, and that the ring that he bought was destroyed in the fire. The characters start over at that point in South Bohan, thanks to Mallory. Mallory sets up Niko and Roman with a new apartment that's kind of a dump. This is the lowest point in the series as far as like what these characters have economically. They're basically broke at this point. Then Mallory sets up Niko with Manny and Elizabeta Torres. In short, Manny is a fraud, and Elizabeta is like a basically a drug lord, drug queen, cocaine queen. Through Elizabeta, you meet Packie McCreary, Playboy X, and Johnny K. And with that, you basically... That's the end of my notes, by the way, or that's the end of my script. I have notes from here about the characters, but that's pretty much it. It ends there because I don't need to go into any more other than that, as far as like what happens with the plot. Because at that point, the beauty of GTA 4 really begins, because you open up. Like, you can do any mission in any order, basically. Now, there are chains, and there are missions that lead to other missions, but you can do anything in any order you want. If you want to save killing Playboy or Dwayne till the very end of the game, you can do that, which is freaking awesome. I love that. It really adds to the replay value of this game, and there's a lot of great replay value with just the versatility of the game, the random elements of it, with the different weapons and the different reactions with characters, and police officers can show up and mess things up, or random gang members can show up during a mission. And it's really a great thing about this game, and it's part of the reason why this is one of my favorite games. So, yeah, at that point, the reason why I have to stop there, as far as like going down the list of the plot elements, or the plot, just basically the events of this game, is because that's when you're introduced to all the characters, and that's when this game opens up. So you can do anything in any order, and you get introduced to a bunch of the new characters through Elizabeta. You get introduced to Packie, Playboy, Johnny, and through Packie you meet all the McCrearys, including Kate. Through Playboy you meet Dwayne, and through Johnny you have Lost and Damned and all that stuff, which I will talk about, by the way. So let's talk about the characters. Now, before I talk about the characters, I gotta take a drink of water because I've been talking this whole time. Holy crap. Alright, so we'll start with Roman. And funny enough, as soon as we get to this point, I made it to the island. So I'm trying to be accurate here with this walkthrough of GTA 4. We are walking through this game. We are walking through Liberty City. And we just reached the point where the game opens up. So at that point, you can get Packie, and you can do the bank heist, which opens up the whole game. You also do the mission with Playboy and Johnny, and that opens up the Manhattan part, or Algonquin, if you prefer. So let's talk about the characters. Let's talk about Roman a little bit. So, one thing I wanted to say about Roman is that Roman is everything that Niko wants to be, and Niko is everything that Roman wants to be. Now, that's not speculation on my part, that's literally stated in the game. That's the last piece of dialogue that you get when you do all the dialogue and you take him out bowling or out eating or whatever, and you do all that stuff. So, I think that that's really interesting, and I think that that's a beautiful thing, and I think that's why those two characters love each other so much. Even though they hate each other sometimes, and they disagree, and they argue, at the end of the day, Roman is a good man. Like, I mean, he's not great. Like, he cheats and all that, and, you know, he's not perfect. He has his gambling debts, and, you know, he's hopelessly optimistic. You know, he does very stupid things out of just pure optimism. You know, not thinking ahead. But that's everything that Niko wants to be. Niko just wants to live. Like, Niko just wants to live day to day, like Roman, and not worry about the future, not have to have these awful dreams about the war, and getting 6 hours of sleep every night. Or who knows, maybe even less than that. Like, just this life that Niko lives in. And then Roman... And Niko is everything that Roman wants to be, because Roman wants to be tough. Roman wants to be a strong man like Niko, a man of conviction and integrity. And I think that that's really powerful, and it speaks to these characters because, well, Niko is a pessimist, and Roman is an optimist. Niko may start out as kind of an optimist in the beginning, but in the end, I mean, he definitely is a pessimist. I find the gambling addiction that Roman has to be just perfect. It's perfect that his blind optimism would just make him really susceptible to just gambling and the debts and everything. It just all makes perfect sense with his character. He's presented as an idiot, you know, in the beginning, but there's great character development because, like I said earlier, Roman is the only character that doesn't have his head up his ass at the end. Niko is the one that refuses to change. He refuses to budge. He is cursed to him. But Roman has hope. Roman lives his life like a normal human being, you know? While Niko cheats, he does crime. You know, he kills people, he steals things, he does these awful things. So Roman is more realistic than Niko, and to be quite honest, Roman is more realistic than a lot of the other characters, even Packie. And that's pretty sad. I mean, that says something about how these characters really just have their heads up their asses, and it's, they're in a rut, you know? To put it better than heads up their asses, they're in a rut, they're depressed, they are stuck in a ditch that just seems bottomless, you know? It seems like they can't get out of it. So, I want to talk a little bit about Michelle really quick, with the twist. So, it gets revealed to you that Michelle is the agent, and Niko is pretty offended by that. I find that actually to be kind of sad. You know, I think I think Niko and Michelle had or Karen, I should say, sorry. I think that they had a pretty good relationship, believe it or not, even though there was a deception involved and everything. I find their relationship to be interesting. And I think that maybe if things were different, they could have worked out. And I think it's pretty sad. She's basically in debt to the UL paper guy, who we don't know the identity of, by the way. I'll talk a little bit about him. But she gets pushed to her limits, you know, and she is in debt to him, just like Niko is in debt. And she ends up turning into a ruthless person. And this is when I'll get to Grand Theft Auto 5 a little bit. She actually tortures a man in Grand Theft Auto 5. She breaks his hand with a flashlight and threatens to stick it up his ass. And basically threatens to kill him, probably. Or threatens to torture him. And she's very ruthless in Grand Theft Auto 5. When in 4, she was not presented as that. And I think the reason why is because she just got worse. She just fell deeper into this hole, this pit. And the pit is something that I'm going to be talking about with this game, because that's part of this game. This game has a flow that is much like a pit, or what I prefer, actually, is that it's like drowning. This game is like drowning. It starts off with Niko fairly afloat, you know. He is trying to be optimistic. He's coming to America to start over. Now, he does have other motivations. He does have motivations of revenge and closure. But really, he is honest about it. He really does want to start over. He just gives up very quickly because he feels like he's cursed. He's stuck in that rut that I mentioned. And it's something that I like to compare it to. It's like drowning. He is sinking. And that's what this game is. That's what the pacing is. It is you sinking deeper and deeper into the ocean until you hit the floor. And then at the very last minute, you snap. You wake up, and you swim to the top for air. And you reach for air, and you make it. And you survive. That's how I would compare this game. Or that's the analogy that I would use for this game. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. Some people might disagree, but it sounds good, damn it. So, I like the way that sounds. I like the way that analogy works, and that's kind of always how I viewed this game, with its themes and its pacing. So, let's talk about Little Jacob a little bit. I don't have much to say about him, unfortunately. I'm also going to talk about Brucie a little bit too, and I don't have much to say about him either. So, with Little Jacob's main theme is that he's loyal. That's his theme. And that's why Niko is loyal to him. That's why Niko sticks with little Jacob, because little Jacob and Niko have that in common. They are loyal to one another, and they are loyal to their friends. Little Jacob is loyal to his girlfriend. Little Jacob's loyal to Badman. Little Jacob worries about Badman. Niko is loyal to Roman. You know, he's loyal to his family. Mallory. Eventually Packie. I'll get to Packie in a second here. And that loyalty is true to the end. They are loyal to each other to the very end. The last person that is with you at the end of the game is little Jacob, no matter which ending you choose, whether it's revenge or deal. Little Jacob's there with you to the very end. And I think that that's powerful. Now, whether or not little Jacob is an optimist or a pessimist is kind of up for debate. I think he's an optimist, but he's presented as kind of neutral in the end, so I think it could swing either way. But, yeah, he's kind of neutral in the end. So then we have Brucie, who is definitely an optimist, by the way. A little bit too blind of an optimist. I don't have much to say about him, like I said. He was bullied as a kid. That's the most important bit of characterization that we have. He was bullied by Maury. We find out about that in the Ballad of Gay Tony. But we also find out about him being bullied just by talking to him in the vanilla game. And so with that, you know, we find out he's bullied. And Niko actually apologizes to him, basically. Like, he says, "I'm sorry that you were bullied." And I think it's a great moment, because it shows Niko's characterization. It shows Niko as a person. You know, Niko cares about people. It's hard to believe, you know, considering he kills people and everything, but he does care. You know, one of the greatest examples of this I can think of is actually in the email that you get from Niko's mother. And Niko, if you, in the game, you can respond positively and negatively to emails. And if you respond negatively to the email, it literally will not let you. The game won't let you respond negatively to the email, because Niko cannot say bad things to his mom. And I think that that's really important. Niko is loyal, like I said, and Niko cares. Niko will help people on the street. Like the one woman, Marnie, I think her name was. The girl that was jonesing in the street, you know? Like, he'll help people. He helps people that are down on their luck, that are, you know, drug addicted, and they're shaking and everything. He helps people, you know, just random people. And that's an important character trait. And Niko cares about Brucie. Niko genuinely says, "I'm sorry that you were bullied, man." And that's important. Because even though Niko is a total monster, he does care. And he cares when he's not having bullets fired at him. And that's an important point that I'll bring up in a bit. I have a thing to talk about with Niko as far as him and PTSD and addiction to combat. But, yeah, other things I have to say about Brucie, he actually kills people, which I find interesting. Brucie is presented as kind of comic relief, and he's funny. I do find Brucie genuinely funny. I get why some people maybe find him annoying, but I find him funny and entertaining and likable, just in general. But he does kill people, and I find that interesting. He has, like, roid rage, and he sends Niko out to just straight up murder people, which is kind of insane. But he's kind of a tragic character. You know, he was bullied, and he's just this kind of shell of a human, because he's got all this self-doubt, all these self-confidence problems, and he's just a total wreck. You know, he's roided himself out. He's just, he objectifies so many women. He doesn't view women as people. He doesn't even view people as people. He can't stop talking about people as if they're just meat, you know, talking about their bodies. You know, Brucie is a character that has weight to him. He's comic relief, but there is tragedy in him, and he's interesting. I like him. He might also be gay, which is interesting. He's very critical of that, I guess. He doesn't really... I mean, he might not be gay. I guess he's just bisexual. I don't know. Whatever. It doesn't really matter, but... yeah, that's interesting. And he's very insecure about that, which is kind of sad. Now, I have one question about Brucie. What does Niko see in Brucie? Why does Niko hang out with Brucie? Now, this question, as far as I know, doesn't really get answered proper in this game. We just kind of have to speculate. I guess Niko just kind of likes him. I don't know if Niko finds him entertaining. Like we do as players, you know, Niko's kind of a connection between the players and the world. So maybe Niko just hangs out with him because he finds him funny. You know, he likes to make fun of him in the emails. Whenever you get an email from Brucie, no matter how you respond, Niko just kind of makes fun of him. Him and Roman and their friendship. I like their camaraderie, even though it's not necessarily the deepest thing in the world. Whew. Okay, so let's talk about Dwayne and Playboy. Whew. Okay, so I'll talk about Playboy first. Playboy is a likable dick. He's a likable monster. He's kind of like Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. If anyone here has seen Game of Thrones, I'm sure people have. He's very conniving. Now, I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't say that he's at all comparable to, or comparable to Littlefinger when it comes to intelligence, because Playboy is a true dumbass. He's like Littlefinger if Littlefinger wasn't smart. He thinks he's playing everyone, but he's not. He's just kind of an idiot. And in that way, you almost feel bad for Playboy, but you also can't feel bad for him because he literally asks you to kill his loyal friend, Dwayne, who's depressed and suicidally depressed, might I add. And he talks... One of the subtle details about Playboy... Well, maybe it's not so subtle. I don't know. There's a... Oh my gosh, that woman just fell. Sorry. There's a point where Playboy literally... You're on top of his building, right? And when you're at the building, Playboy talks about the people on the ground as if they're ants. Like, look at those little ants down there. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I don't think I am. When you're on that building and you look down, people don't look like ants. They're small, but they're not ants. It's not necessarily even a tall building. It's kind of a smaller building in, like, Harlem. So, what's the point? Okay, so, basically what it says about Playboy is that he has an inflated view of what he is and what his status is. That's the most interesting thing about Playboy right there. And we also see it in just how he prefers to control people, you know? Before Niko kills him, Niko literally says, "You didn't change the game changed you." And a perfect example of the game changing him is when he's on top of that skyscraper in South Manhattan, or in Lower Manhattan, and he orders Niko to go take out those guys at the construction site, and he's just watching you with the binoculars. And it ties back to what he says about ants. He views people as little ants, little toys that he can play with. It's his ant farm. That's it. And that's Playboy in a nutshell. And I don't think I could have said that any better. So let's talk about Dwayne. Okay, so I'll start with a quote. "You remind me of me." That's what Niko says to Dwayne in one of the earlier missions. Dwayne cracks jokes to Niko, and Niko laughs. Dwayne talks to Niko, and they have genuine chemistry. They talk to each other, and they relate to each other. Dwayne will get depressed and down, literally suicidal, and Niko says, "You remind me of me." That's what he says. And that ties back into the depression, you know. If you talk to Dwayne, you get him as a friend on your contact list if you save him, which always do that, by the way, because you get Playboy's house, which is awesome, and you get Dwayne. Dwayne's an awesome character. If you get enough status with him, you get his affection up high enough, you can call for backup, and he'll like call his boys in, and you can get backup on missions. I digress, but yeah, that's awesome, and unrelated sort of. But there's a piece of dialogue that you get with him in the conversations where he talks about his father dying and how he felt nothing. He didn't feel sad. He didn't feel happy. He just felt nothing. What does that sound like to you? That sounds like depression. And anyone who's gone through that knows what that's like, I feel like. Yeah, he felt nothing. And you see that in a lot of the dialogue. Dwayne is awesome. That's all I have to say. There's one little detail. In the dialogue, if you talk to Dwayne, Niko, it's a fun little fact here, Niko mentions that he grew up without electricity until he was like 12 or 15. I think it was 15. Like, I think it was like in his teenage years. So he grew up without electricity. And it's at a point where Dwayne is like literally ranting about his life and talking about like how bad things are for him and everything. And Niko gets a little bit annoyed by that. I find that interesting. Niko gets annoyed by Dwayne. And the thing is that Dwayne kind of bitches a little bit. He kind of complains about his life and how bad things were. Niko doesn't complain as much as Dwayne, but Niko does complain. And that's an aspect of Niko's own character that he doesn't like. He doesn't like that about himself when he reveals things about his life. So he kind of just has this little dick measuring contest with Dwayne about how, I guess, unprivileged they were. What's the proper word for that? I don't know. I don't remember. How poor they were, you know, it's just, they have this little contest over that. And Dwayne is beat because Niko grew up without electricity. So, okay, we're going to talk about Packie now. And Packie, and we're going to talk about Kate, too. And we're going to talk about the bank heist, because the bank heist is awesome. So before we do that, let me read my notes here. Okay, so I'll just start with saying the bank heist is absolutely incredible and is a turning point in the story for Niko. It happens at about the middle point of the game, though that does depend on which order you do the missions in, to be fair, but it's around that point. And that's the point where Niko really starts to not care at all. Now, I mean, he doesn't really care a lot in general in the game. Like, there's a lot of points where Niko just becomes apathetic, especially during the Brucie missions, where Brucie is clearly suffering from roid rage and is just asking Niko to kill people, and Niko doesn't really give a shit. Like, Niko does not care at those points, but after the bank heist, Niko does a mission for Gerald. It's literally the first mission that you do after the bank heist, or the first mission that you get after the bank heist, where Gerald asks you to start a war between the crime families, and Niko does it without caring. Niko starts a war. I think it's actually the worst crime that Niko does in this whole game, to be honest. He starts a war and causes the deaths of many people without even thinking about it, because to Niko it's just a job. And I think that says a lot about that bank heist and how much that maybe had an effect on him. The bank heist is awesome. I recommend looking it up. I don't have much else to say about it. I think it definitely affected Niko, though. And there's a point where Niko is talking to Kate in dialogue later, where they're talking about the war, and Niko says, there are things that I want to forget about the war, things that I want to let go of, and, you know, things that I wish never happened. And then he says, well, to be honest, there are things in Liberty City that happened to me that I also wish I could forget about. And I think that's one of them. I think that the bank heist was a big influence on him, because as I talked about with the drowning thing, that's the point where Niko starts drowning the hardest. That's the point when Niko starts taking jobs from the Mafia after that, and doing jobs like the assassination contracts, where you pick up a phone, like GTA 3 Claude style, and you're just assassinating random people. So I think that bank heist it definitely had an effect on him. Yeah, rest in peace, St. Michael, by the way. Patrick McCreary is first represented as kind of unlikable. He's very disrespectful to his mom. He's very disrespectful to Kate. He literally cusses in front of his mom, kind of carelessly, and then she'll say, watch the language, and then he'll be like, sorry, Mom, and then he'll go on to fuck, 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 you know, just start cussing again right after. Just blatant disrespect. So Packie, I did not like Packie the first time I played it. But then, you know, on replays, I kind of realized he's a great character. And, you know, he becomes likable really quickly. You know, I love the dialogue between him and Niko about prison, where Packie is literally it's almost like Packie's, like, complimenting Niko's appearance by saying, hey, you'd do well in prison, you'd get raped in prison, which is, like, really random. Like, it's really funny. Like, Packie's a funny character. Like, it's got a dark sense of humor, you know. This game, as dead serious as this game is, I think it has a great dark sense of humor, and I think that it works really well for it. As dead serious as this game is, I think that this game has the best comedy in the series as well. And not all the comedy is black comedy like that. Some of the comedy is pretty lighthearted too. Like, you know, Brucie and some of the stuff on the TV and the radio. So, he's blatantly pessimistic. Let's talk about the pessimism of Packie, because Packie is definitely a pessimist. He goes so far as to even make Niko uncomfortable by saying, I wish my father was drowned at birth, so my entire family would be dead. That's one of the most cynical things I've ever heard in my life. Pretty bad. Well, there's actually a few more cynical things. Niko has a pretty damn cynical line at the end of the game that I'll give. But that's pretty bad. So I feel bad for Packie there. He has a very abusive family. Gerald abused people. His dad abused people. Gerald basically fought Francis and almost killed him, was like smashing his head into the ground. Francis is an interesting character too, by the way. I'm very excited to talk about him. The abusive family, there's one point where he describes a story of Gerald basically going to prison. He goes to juvie, and his dad has a drunken rage, and basically what happens is he throws like a plate. There was a plate that was reserved for Gerald when he would return that his mom set for him every night, and kept it there around dinner out of respect for Gerald. And the dad, in a drunken rage, threw it, and it shattered into pieces. And the mom didn't even react. And Packie just says, like, he'll never understand that about his mom. How she couldn't even react. But he basically says, I think it's denial. I think it was denial. That she just didn't know how to react. And she just gave him the benefit of the doubt. And basically moved on and let it happen. Again and again and again. One of the first lines that Packie gives when you first do the conversations with him in the, when you get him as a friend on your contacts, is he says, you ever feel the need to obliterate yourself, Niko? And then Niko says, I use my need to obliterate on other people, or I use my rage to obliterate on other people, or something like that. I'm kind of butchering that quote. But I find that to be an interesting quote. And I find that to be interesting as, just to show the differences between these characters a little bit. He talks about cocaine being a catch-22. Like it's a drug that pretty much gives him the confidence, because he has, like, social anxiety. That's one thing I find interesting about Packie, and why I find him kind of relatable. Out of all the GTA characters, I feel like Packie and Niko are probably the most relatable. But there's a point where Packie's talking about his social anxiety and how he can't talk to women. So he uses cocaine to give him that boost. Yet it's a catch-22 for him because he can't, well, to be blunt, he can't get an erection because of his cocaine. I don't know if that's accurate, like, medically. I don't know much about drugs, so I don't know if that's true, but I assume it's true, I guess. So he says it's a catch-22. There's a funny line where Niko says, isn't cocaine the grounded realist drug, like, for realists? And Packie responds to by saying, if sticking your head up your own fucking ass is considered more grounded, then yeah. Something like that. I might be messing that quote up a little bit, but it's to that extent. And that's hilarious to me. I laugh at that line. Packie's just funny in general. I love when you're driving in the game with him, and he just says, like, what is wrong with these fucking roads? Driving in Liberty fucking City for you, you know? Like, he's really funny. He's very, like, strong, kind of loud New Yorker type, and I love him. I love that character. He's great. Not to stereotype New Yorkers. I've never been to New York. I don't know anyone from New York, so... But I guess that's the stereotype, so... It's funny. He wanted to be an artist, which I find to be really tragic. He wanted to be an artist, and that dream just got shattered. Because instead, what he was forced to do in middle school was run scouting operations for his brother Gerald. You know, when they were doing heists, you know, in middle school, he was scouting out, helping with their organized crime. It's really sad how screwed he was just from the very beginning. Rolling joints for his dad and everything. It's wrong. It's so wrong. Alright, let's talk about the tricky stuff now. The kind of dead serious stuff. So, Packie was molested by his father. And so was Gerry. You don't find out about this until you fully talk to Packie. Get the full insight from him, get his affection all the way up. And he will tell you that that happened to him. And he says that he's glad that his dad is dead. And, it says a lot about him. Because this leads to the other thing. I think Packie is sexually confused. If this video gets views, I'm gonna wonder if people actually picked up on this, and, or maybe I'm just reading too much into this, I don't know. But I've always interpreted Packie as kind of sexually confused. I don't know if he's gay or bisexual, but he's definitely confused, because he mentions at one point flat out that sometimes when he's doing drugs and he's partying, he thinks he's into girls, but then he doesn't know. And he's not really sure what he's into. And I find that to be really sad. Especially for a guy that's in his, like, 30s, like, and he doesn't really understand fully what he is. Like, it's just a very sad state of affairs. There's other lines, too. You know, I had mentioned the joke about Packie talking to Niko about prison and how he would do well in prison. I almost think that was a way of Niko, or Packie, kind of almost hitting on Niko in a funny way. Though I don't know if that was, you know, dudes do that. I don't know. People do that. They make fun of each other in that way. You could read into that, or you could not read into that. Though Packie does get defensive about it, and he basically says, like, you know, not that I'm trying to be gay. I'm not gay, bro. Kind of like that. So you get the little hints there, and I don't know. I think that it's related to his father. I think he was molested. I don't think Packie's gay, but I think he's just sexually confused because his father molested him and it ruined him. And some people, when they get molested, they react differently, you know? Like, some people just get aggressive. Some people just say, you know, if I encounter the guy that molested me, I'm gonna fucking kill him. Like, I fantasize about the day when they would show up again so I could beat the shit out of them or kill them. Or, you know, I wish a motherfucker would. You know, that kind of mindset. I wish someone would try it so I could show them that I mean business. You know, like that kind of thing. And there are people that react that way. They get very aggressive after being molested. But then there are some people that, I mean, there's so many different variables, I couldn't go down the list. But there are some people that just get sexually confused. They just don't know. Or some people double down. They go very hard in the straight kind of tough guy thing. I think Gerry kind of goes more in that direction. Though Gerry just turned out to be a complete asshole. To be honest, I don't really like Gerry as a character, Gerald. I find him to be kind of irredeemable in a lot of ways, and I'm kind of glad he went to jail, to be honest. Yeah, I think Packie is confused, and, you know, I think, and this is the last thing I wanted to say about Packie, the final point. I think Packie loves Niko. Now, I don't know if that love is, I mean, you could speculate and say that that love is romantic if you want to go down the route that Packie's gay. I don't think he's gay. I kind of view it as a love that's like family. And the reason why I say this is because Packie literally tells Niko that he has never told anyone in his life that he was molested. Niko is the first person that he told that. The only other person that knew was his mom and Gerry. Packie might not even know if Kate knows. Kate does know. Kate knows that Packie was molested, and so was Gerry. Like, she knows both. But does Packie know that she knows? Who knows? I don't know. But he told Niko. He trusted Niko. He loved Niko enough. That is love, in my opinion. Packie is a man that has lived for 30 years. He is 30 years old. And he's never trusted anyone enough to tell them that in his life. Yeah, without a doubt, I think Niko loved Packie. Or sorry, Packie loved Niko. That leads to the other thing. Packie loves Niko, but I don't think Niko loves Packie. And that's the other thing. Niko only loves Roman. I don't think Niko loves Packie. He likes Packie. He wouldn't be hanging out with him if he didn't like him. And he does relate to him. But I don't think Niko feels that same way. That's speculation, though. Who knows? And the last thing I'll end it with, there's a great scene. If you get Packie drunk, all the drunk dialogue in this game is awesome, by the way, all of it. But if you get Packie drunk, take him out drinking, he literally sings to Niko, which I think is amazing. I think it's an amazing scene. It's really bad singing, kind of, but it's not. It's also not bad. You know, it's okay. It has its ups and downs. He's drunk, so can't totally judge him on that. But yeah, I think it's a great scene where he literally sings to him. It's like, it's just cool. It's a cool scene. So let's talk about Kate. Oh, Kate. Kate, let's just get this out of the way from the very beginning. Kate is a pessimist. Just gonna leave that there. Some people might disagree with that. I would disagree with their disagreement. But Kate is presented as an optimist in the beginning, but she is lying to herself. She is not an optimist. She is a pessimist. Again, like I said, nothing wrong with that, and I don't want to accuse anyone of anything. Like, you know, make it seem like it's a bad thing. Though she's a pessimist, and she relates to Niko on that way. That's why they get along so well. Is because they both are cynical as shit. About life, about America, and about everything. So, yeah, that's the most important thing. She tries. She goes to therapy. But she literally calls her therapist a fucking idiot. So she doesn't really care about her therapist, but she's trying. So she's like a pessimist that's trying to be an optimist. She's very interesting. I feel like Niko has the same struggle. And that's why they get along. And that's why she's a great girlfriend in the game. Probably my favorite. Though I will admit, I do like the Craigslist girl. I find her insufferable, but I find her really interesting and really tragic. She's an interesting story. Or she tells a pretty interesting story about what cocaine can do to people. Or what drugs can do to people. Like, I don't know. I really recommend looking up that character online, the videos, or dating her in the game, because in the game it's called Craps List, or Crap List, and her name is Alex, and yeah, she's interesting. She literally, like, her mom has breast cancer or something, and she doesn't even care. Like, she's, like, apathetic. Like, she's, like, an awful, awful human being. But she has moments, like, weird moments of, like, sympathetic, like, characterizing moments. Like, it's very interesting. She's a fascinating character. She's the best girlfriend out of all of them. And then the other girlfriend is about privilege or whatever. She talks about, you know, American privilege, rich privilege, white privilege, all that crap, all that stuff, all that fun stuff. Yeah, so... And then there's the other girlfriend, which I forget. Oh yeah, the one hopelessly... the girl that, like, wants to become a superstar, and she's a nurse, whatever. I don't have much to say about her. So... She's trying to be an optimist, but she's failing. Her father treated her better than the boys, which I find to be fitting and interesting. And she says that she loves her father. She gave him the benefit of the doubt and all that, which is one of the weird instances of her being more optimistic than pessimistic, even though she knows that her brothers were being molested. She gives her father the benefit of the doubt. Which is interesting. You know, I wouldn't go against that, you know. That's an interesting character trait, and it adds depth to this game. It doesn't just portray the father as a complete monster, even though he was a monster in ways. You know, like, she loved him. She loved her father, despite all that, and didn't want to believe it. One other thing I have to say, holy crap, she is a wreck when she's drunk. If you ever get Kate drunk in the game, she is a crying, screaming mess. And her pessimistic nature really comes out. She's not even trying at that point. Like, when she's drunk, her full emotions come out. And it is sad. I mean, it's funny sometimes, but it's mostly just sad. Like, most of the drunk dialogue is at least kind of humorous. For her, it's just kind of depressing. Her and Niko have a lot in common, them both being super cynical. But there's a point where Niko encourages her to become a teacher, which I find really interesting and cool, because Niko is, again, coming back to the same thing that I mentioned earlier about Niko talking to Brucie and saying that he's sorry that he was bullied. Like, Niko cares. He's an awful person to be, like, as far as, like, a role model. Like, Niko is not a good example of how to live life. But if you ask Niko for personal advice, I feel like he would give you a good, honest answer. And he would be helpful. He is a good friend. He's a good person somewhere in there. Yeah, last note here. She revealed when she's drunk that she knew that the boys were being molested. I already mentioned that. So, okay, with that, we got Johnny. And his friends. I'll talk about the Lost and Damned a little bit. I don't have much to say about Terry and Clay and Angus and Jim. I like them. That's basically it. I like the little detail that Clay has bad hearing. And the reason why he has bad hearing is because of, like, war-related stuff. That's cool. I like that backstory. As far as Johnny goes, I think that the biggest and most important character trait about Johnny is that he is kind of the opposite to Niko. Johnny is... Now, Rockstar themselves said this. I believe Laszlo said this in an interview. Johnny is Native American. Like, I almost said Native American. He is born American. He is opposite to Niko in that way. For Johnny, America is home and always has been. For Niko, this is a new place. It's foreign and it's brand new. For Johnny, it's always been this way, and he's loyal to that American idea. And, you know, he brings up that patriotism when you're working for, like, Tom Stubbs, or John, whatever his name is, Stubbs, the politician guy. That looks like Kevin Spacey, by the way, which is kind of weird. It kind of sounds like him. And it's really weird because Kevin Spacey maybe sexually harassed. I mean, he did sexually harass people, and in the game you see Tom Stubbs' wiener, like he shows you his dick randomly, which is kind of weird. So, another thing I have to say about Johnny, he's older, and he's more tired. Johnny's almost in his 40s. Niko is kind of younger. He's like in his 30s, like early 30s. I think he's like 31 years old. Johnny, I think, is like 37 or 38. Johnny has been at this game for longer than Niko has, and Johnny is sicker and more tired of it. And Johnny wants to take his club into a direction that's more legit. Niko is kind of seeking closure, but they both have that common characteristic, and I find that to be cool. You know, I like that. It's too bad that they were on opposite sides and that Niko ended up killing Jim and that Johnny ended up kidnapping Roman, because I think that they could have been good friends if the circumstances were different. Another thing I wanted to mention, Luis is younger. So, Luis is like in his 20s, and Johnny is in his like late 30s, and Niko's in his his early 30s. So I like that age gap. You get the younger, more kind of green guy like Luis. Now, Luis does have experience with like going to prison and doing crime, but Luis is younger. Luis is kind of in his prime in a way. Niko is ready to quit, and Johnny is really ready to quit. Like just ready to rest in peace. Like he's ready to like burn down the club at the end, and he really wants to go legit. He really wants his comrades to stop killing each other and stop killing angels of death. And like, you know, Billy Gray came in and like he basically just ruined the peace between the angels of death. Johnny held the peace, you know, he was diplomatic. Johnny's a good guy, I think, you know, I mean, he has a rough past and he's definitely hardcore, you know, he kills people. Like, I mean, it's hard to say a character is a good person or not with GTA, because, especially with GTA protagonists, because it's a GTA game, so they have to kill people. I think by the standards of a GTA protagonist, I think Johnny is a good person. He cares about people, you know, he sticks up for the immigrants. He punches that one guy that's holding up the pregnant couple. There's just great scenes in Lost and Damned, to be honest. He's loyal to Ashley, even though she's terrible. Especially through GTA 5, he's loyal to her to the very end, and even dies, basically, for her, sticking up for her. His brother is in the military, and they have a bad relationship. It's kind of sad, to be honest. There's a little email that you can do where you respond positively or negatively to that. I've never done the negative one, but if you respond positively, the brother responds negatively anyways, so it's kind of a sad situation where I don't think Johnny ever really got along with his brother before he died. And speaking of Johnny dying, we're going to talk about that next, but before we get to that, I'm just going to mention one little thing really quick. I think it's awesome. Well, I don't know if it's awesome, but it's cool. It's cool that The Lost is called The Lost MC, because there's a certain irony in that I find to be just kind of hilarious and cool. The gang is called The Lost, and they'll say things like Lost Forever, you know, Brothers Forever, or Brothers for Life, Lost Forever, you know, things like that. It's because they're lost, because that's kind of the thing with these characters. These characters are lost. And they even use that word with Darko later, when Darko says, you know, I'm lost. You know, these characters are lost, all of them, in some form or another. And it's about regaining themselves, in a way, or at least trying to. So, yeah, I find it cool to be... I find that irony to be cool, you know, with The Lost MC literally being called The Lost. It's kind of a cool detail. I also want to mention the burning of the past and letting go. I think that the ending to Lost and Damned is really cool. GTA 4, I think, has a satisfying ending overall, but I think Lost and Damned has an even more satisfying ending, because it's cool how it signifies just burning down the past and kind of just letting go of it. When they burned down the motorcycle club, like, it's just kind of a cool moment because they're just letting go. They're all letting go. And that's kind of what Niko's story is about. It's about letting go. It's about moving on from the past and, like, confronting your demons and finding closure. And there's good closure in that ending. So they burn the past, you know, they burn that place down, and then they play the song Every Picture Tells a Story by Rod Stewart. And I'm not a big Rod Stewart fan, but I like that song a lot, actually, and I think it fits perfectly. And in the ending credits, you see Niko's life retold, or reshown, you know, in the credits, alongside Johnny's, and you see clips from the game, ending with the bank heist. And that's totally awesome. Yeah, rest in peace, Johnny. I find his death to be really sad. I didn't really get emotional, cry or anything, but I was really bummed out when they killed Johnny. I will defend them killing Johnny. I think that the perfect way to introduce a monster like Trevor is to kill a character that existed before. If you're going to kill Johnny, Niko, or Luis, I prefer you to kill off Johnny. Not that, you know, I mean, I like Johnny more than Luis as a character, but I think Johnny was kind of the perfect character to kill because he never let go. He stayed with his brothers for life. Brothers for life, lost forever. He stayed with Terry and with Clay forever until he died. And with Ashley. He stuck by them. He was loyal to the very end and stuck up for them. And took glass in the face, in his brain, because that was the price that he gave. And he never let go in the end, as tired as he was. So, rest in peace, cowboy. Also, the song Wanted, Dead or Alive, I think perfectly fits with that character. I recommend looking up the lyrics. I'm not going to quote them, but if you read the lyrics to yourself, perfectly fitting with Johnny's character. The Bon Jovi song, Wanted, Dead or Alive, it's perfect. I'll talk more about music later, as far as how music ties into this game, like ties into the story, believe it or not. I think a lot of the lyrics tie in. I'm not going to go too deep into detail of that, because I would be here forever. I'm already here long enough. So, I will talk about that eventually. So let's talk about Luis. Luis is, I'll be honest, a little bit boring. I'm not a big fan of Luis. He's cool. Like, he's got a cool edge to him, you know? Like, he's, like, you know, the way he kind of is a womanizer, and he runs the clubs and stuff. He always says the right things. I think that the DLC has people that just run their mouths way too much. Characters like Gay Tony and all the other characters. They're all just non-stop bitching about everything. And Luis kind of comes along and doesn't really have as much to say. He's kind of like Claude in that way, where he just doesn't really have much to say. And when he does say it, it's kind of a good zinger. And, you know, he'll punch a guy in the face or something. You know, Luis is cool in a way, but there's just not much to him. And that's kind of why I find him boring at the end of the day. There isn't much to say about him, unfortunately. I'll mention the Ballad of Gay Tony a little bit. I like the missions. Sorry, let me get away from this fire. Holy crap. Are they chasing me? Oh, wow, they are. Okay. Alright. Well, you know what? Just let them kill me. Anyways, so, where was I? Holy crap. So, I don't like the characters in Ballad of Gay Tony. This is a little bit of a segue, because I kind of forgot what I was going to say. But, I don't like the characters in Ballad of Gay Tony. I think, due to some of the negativity around GTA 4 at the time, with the game being more dead serious, I think they kind of went back on things, and in GTA 5 and in Ballad of Gay Tony, you kind of see the characters degrade and kind of turn, like, way more cynical than they ever were before, to a point where they're, like, almost unlikable. So, like, most of the characters in Ballad of Gay Tony are just, like, kind of whiny, unlikable. They're, like, super evil. Like, Rocco is just terrible. I don't know. His family and friends are even awful. Like, except for his one friend. There's one of his friends that's okay. The kind of dumber one. He's okay. I just, Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say. So, Ballad of Gay Tony, it focuses on the strengths of, like, the Grand Theft Auto series of just kind of being more for fun. So, the mission design is great in Ballad of Gay Tony, but the story is not so great, in my opinion. It's okay, but that's basically my opinion of Ballad of Gay Tony right there. Great gameplay. Definitely added some great stuff that was missing from GTA 4. But it also started some bad trends, I think, that 5 would continue. I like Michael a lot in Grand Theft Auto 5, and I like Franklin a lot, and I sort of like Trevor, but all of the other characters in GTA 5 are, like, totally unlikable to me, and I think Ballad of Gay Tony kind of started that tradition. Credit where it's due, though. I think the Maury missions are pretty cool. There's some cool characterization of Brucie there, and Maury, and the Ray Bulgarin missions are pretty cool, too. The beheading scene is pretty intense. And it's like the only time in the whole game where Luis actually reacts negatively to something, where he's actually shocked. Yeah, so next up, Francis and Derrick. I like Francis. A lot of people, I've looked up on the GTA forums, and a lot of people say that they prefer Derrick to Francis in the choice of whether you kill one or the other. I prefer Francis. He's an asshole, but he's a likable asshole. It's like, you watch him, and it's like you can't help but admire this son of a bitch for how awful he is. Kind of like Littlefinger, like I mentioned earlier. He's just kind of interesting in that way. And he's useful to Niko, because if you end up not killing him, you use Derrick's death as dirt against him, and you use that so Niko has a guy in the police force that can call off the police from him, which is, like, awesome, just as an ability and just as a concept. So I prefer Francis. I think he's a cool character. Derrick has likable moments, like in the bank heist when he's trying to be more respectful to the people. You know, saying we put these people through a lot today, and Packie's like, fuck these people, fuck your cause. That shit's over, take the needle out of your arm, then tell me what to do. And then he says, I'll let you tell me what to do when you stop shoving half of Bolivia up your nose every Saturday night, and then St. Michael gets shot. Sorry. Had to just quote all that, because that scene is so awesome. So I like that moment with Derrick, but I have to say, I think, overall, I hate him because he ratted. And Packie confirms this, and Derrick kind of hints at this, and the O'Malley guy, I forget his name, I almost wanted to say Martin O'Malley. The O'Malley guy, it's like Aiden? Yeah, it's Aiden O'Malley. He says that Derrick ratted, and that's why he was in jail. They kind of leave it up to you whether or not he ratted or not, but I do believe that he ratted. I believe Aiden O'Malley, and I think it really sucks that you have to kill him. I almost wish it was an option that you didn't kill him. I wish you could get out of killing him, but they force you to. So I don't like Derrick for that reason. So I killed Derrick, left Francis alive. I think it's more in character for Niko, though it's up for debate. Both work. So let's move on to Bernie. He's an optimist. He started over and succeeded. That's the most important point about Bernie. Niko made excuses and became a criminal. Bernie became a gay stereotype and started over and became not a criminal. And that's Bernie in a nutshell. He did what Niko should have done. The gay jokes are a little bit too much with Bernie, I will admit that. I think that they get a little bit too far, but or not too far in the way that they're offensive, just too far in the way that they're not all so funny, you know. But yeah, I think Bernie's a great character. I think after the events of GTA 4, I think Bernie and Niko became friends again. At least I'd hope. The Italian Mafia characters, Ray is an awesome character. I just love how much of a scumbag he is. You know, to be honest with you, out of all the characters in Grand Theft Auto history that you worked for, I think Ray is my favorite. He's just so likable and how much of a scumbag he is, just like Littlefinger, like I mentioned earlier. Man, Littlefinger is just, he keeps coming up in this video. Phil Bell is cool. He's actually an optimist, more or less. I would consider him an optimist. John Gravelli is wildly pessimistic and very entertaining. I love his dialogue. I love the, I care about, you know, like, I'm vain at the end of the day, because I care, you know, if I shit, you know, I want to see the pretty nurse clean it up. It's like, oh my god, that's just cringeworthy. That's so nasty. So he's just a nasty old man. Then we got Jimmy P. Jimmy P is interesting. He's definitely a monster, but I don't actually hate him. There's a point where, if you make the deal ending, Jimmy P actually organizes a number of, he organizes a murder on Niko at the wedding. In the deal ending, like, Niko speculates that Jimmy P and Dimitri both organized the murder of Niko at the wedding. Sorry, I kind of butchered that. But the thing is that that's never confirmed, because Niko actually gets a call from Jimmy P, where Jimmy P basically tells Niko, like, I want you to look after yourself. And I like that. I tend to lean on the speculation that Jimmy P was loyal at the end of the day. That even though he was disrespectful and kind of shitty, that after that last deal was made, Jimmy P was loyal to Niko and did not want to kill him, and that Dimitri was the one that set him up. Because he tells him to just look after yourself. Oh man, so we're coming to the end here. Wow. I love the mission where you kidnap Gracie. I mean, it's kind of annoying, but I hate Gracie. I hate her, especially in Ballad of Gay Tony. She's awful. Gerry goes to prison. I mentioned that. The diamonds, they lose the diamonds. Homeless guy ends up with it. Spoiler alert, I guess. Working for the Mafia. You just work for them. I'm just reading my last notes here. UL paper theory. Okay, so I have a little theory, or I did have a theory for a while, and I ended up changing my mind on this theory. But I had a theory for a while that the UL paper guy was actually Mike Torino from San Andreas, because they have, like, similar traits, and, like, they're both loyal, and, like, they've stayed true to their word at the end of the game, which, I don't know, I find that interesting. It's a cool theory. I don't know, I just thought I'd share it. So, let's talk about Eddie Lowe. Don't have much to say about Eddie Lowe. I find the interaction to be intriguing. Clearly Eddie is evil. Maybe the most evil out of all of the characters in GTA history. I guess Trevor and Claude, maybe Tommy Vercetti, those are the only other debates there as far as evil characters. But Eddie Lowe is pretty bad, and Niko is so messed up, so broken down as a human being, that he has a hard time even reacting to him. Like, Eddie Lowe is saying, like, you know, he's got this bag. It's like, I have this rather heavy bag, and I'm going to take it. I got to drop off the kids at the harbor, you know? And Niko doesn't even react. Like, you know, he talks about raping people and murdering people and torturing people for fun and imitating their voices and talking about the differences between a Manhattan accent and a New Jersey accent. Like, awful shit. And Niko's just kind of, like, sarcastic. He's just kind of like, I hope you're joking. And, like, yeah, you should get laid, buddy. That kind of thing. And I think that says that, again, with this whole drowning thing, I think that mission, you can't even do that mission until you do the bank heist, and I think that's on purpose. But I actually recommend doing that mission until, like, the end of the game. Because I think that's at the point where Niko's at his lowest, almost, where you're dealing with, like, a pedophile rapist, and you don't even give a fuck. Like, damn, dude. Like, I mean, he gives a little bit of a shit, but, like, he really doesn't care. Like, he's just kind of, like, sarcastic and just kind of tired and broken. So it's a great moment. Like, as edgy as it is and as kind of messed up as it is, maybe people would argue that those Eddie Lowe missions go too far. I wouldn't. Just because I think that shows how low Niko is. I think it's an important character moment for Niko. More than Eddie himself. And Eddie gets his comeuppance, you get to kill him, so that's fun. I prefer lighting him on fire with a Molotov cocktail, if that's an option. So, we got Dimitri next. I'm going to talk about Dimitri a little bit. So, one of the things that I love about Dimitri, or one of the ideas that I had about Dimitri that I just actually thought of on my most recent playthrough of this game, is what made Dimitri such a jackass? What made him such a monster? Like, why did he do what he did? Was he always this way? Or did working under Faustin push him over the edge? Or was it after the betrayal of Faustin that he ended up just not giving a shit and betraying everyone, because that just drove him mad? What drove Dimitri mad? What made him such a monster? Totally up for debate. I think, yeah, I don't have much else to say about that. It's just something I've thought about. It's just food for thought. The Dio ending, I think, completes his story arc. You know, if you just kill him in the revenge ending, I feel like it's kind of unsatisfactory. Like, it doesn't really feel satisfying. You just kind of kill him. Dimitri did a lot of messed up stuff. He tried to kill Bernie. He tries to kill Roman, kidnap him. He burns down Roman's business. He does lots of awful stuff. But I don't think Dimitri's story arc is even complete until he sends that hitman to kill Niko at that wedding, and then Roman accidentally gets killed. And then he brags to Niko and says, "I'm glad that Roman's dead. I laughed when I found out he's dead." And Niko shoots him, says, "Welcome to America. Speak English. You betrayed everyone that you came in contact with. You killed my cousin. I guess the survival to the fittest thing really meant a lot to you." And then he dies. I think that's the perfect ending to Dimitri as a character, and I wouldn't have it any other way. That's why I prefer Dio, though I'll go a little bit deeper into that later. Now we'll talk about the big thing, as in the huge thing. We're going to talk about Niko and Darko, because we're right at the end here. Man, this is amazing. Feels good to have this almost over. So first things first, I'm going to recommend an analysis video on GTA 4. I'm going to put it in the description. And in this analysis, this guy makes a great point about the world and the sort of cynical nature of GTA 4 and the sort of like parody of the American dream, that's how Niko sees America from his perspective. And it's an awesome piece of fan theory, and I just love the idea. And whether it's fan theory or not, it's just awesome. So I just recommend that. He also talks about his addiction to combat. I'm not going to even talk about the addiction to combat because he talks about it better, so I'll just leave that to him. One thing I'll say really quick, just on the video, he says some of the lines that Niko says in combat aren't very well written. I think they are actually well written, with the exception of "I'll rip your fucking heart out." I think that's the only line in the game that's kind of, like, as far as combat lines, that's a little bit too overdramatic, I guess. But like the "I'll cut your fucking head off," like the way Niko's actor Michael Hollick says it is just fantastic. I have to give a lot of credit to Mike Hollick. He did a fantastic job of Niko, and it's really sad that he didn't do any other video game gigs or many other acting gigs, to be honest, that I know of. So I'm really sad about that. He's a great actor. Okay, so I recommend looking up the scene between Darko and Niko right now. If you don't want to watch it, that's fine, but it's a great scene, and it's always worth rewatching. Even when I'm not playing GTA 4, sometimes I just get in the mood and I just rewatch it, because I think it's the best scene in the whole game. I've shown friends that scene that have never played GTA 4, and they love that scene, or they like that scene, like they were impressed with it. It's a very well-acted and very well-written scene, where Niko and Darko just have a confrontation, And it's amazing. It's just fantastic. I don't know, I don't have that much to say about it, but I do have a few things to say. I find the fact that Darko betrayed Niko's unit because he felt betrayed because his village was destroyed, that is so important to this theme of revenge being pointless. You work up this whole game to get revenge, only for revenge to mean nothing. Whether you shoot Darko or not, revenge doesn't mean anything. Niko doesn't feel satisfied. So this game is kind of a... This game seems like a typical revenge story, like kind of a generic revenge story, but I think it kind of turns it on its head at the end, because at the end of the day, it just shows how awful revenge is and how it doesn't really solve anything. And it doesn't make you feel better. It just makes the hole inside you feel even worse, feel even bigger. Because then the depression sinks in, and you realize you don't feel better, you don't feel worse, you just feel the same. And thus the cycle of revenge is either completed or continues or whatever right there at the end, because you get the choice of the deal ending or the revenge ending. You also get the choice of sparing Darko or not. I prefer to spare Darko personally, just because I really love the lines after, and I think it's just a great scene. I prefer to spare him. I think it makes more sense. It's more fitting with the themes of this game that you've gone through all this bloodshed only to not kill him. Another little fact, actually, I'm not sure if this is a fact, but this is, because I don't have the actual number here, but Niko, if you do the execution animation, when you kill Darko, you actually shoot him 14 times, I think, and I believe that's for every soldier that died in his unit, which is hardcore and really cool. Niko says a line that is cynical as fuck if you spare him. He says to basically torture him by keeping him alive is the best way to go, because only the dead find closure and the living do not. Like, killing him wouldn't change anything. Keeping him alive is the only way to go, because killing him wouldn't bring back the dead people of his unit or of his village. And he says that, in a way, keeping him alive isn't a mercy. That maybe killing him would have been a mercy. So that's one of the most cynical things I've ever heard in my life. Only the dead find closure, the living do not. Holy crap. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. How would I know? So yeah, in conclusion, you definitely see the themes of optimism and pessimism through all of the characters. You see the themes in, even in the music, to be honest. I mean, like on Tough Gong Radio, you know, you have Uncle Bradshaw, who's more of an optimist. On Liberty Rock, Iggy Pop is more of a pessimist. The Vibe, Von Harper, rest in peace, by the way, more optimistic, I would say. By the way, Uncle Bradshaw on Tough Gong, he also died, so rest in peace to him too. The Journey, definitely pessimistic. Vladivostok, that's more optimistic. And then there's a lot of the other stations which kind of vary. I'd say mostly they're optimistic, but a few are pessimistic. So it just kind of comes back to that theme. By the way, I have to say this too. I didn't come up with the whole optimist-pessimist thing on my own. I actually found out about that through the wiki. On the wiki, I remember I was looking up something about like characters or something with character information, character bios, and I saw that the characters were separated by optimism and pessimism. And boy, is that true. And once that clicked with me, it was like mind blown, just like, holy crap. That's what this game is about? It's about optimism and pessimism? That's the whole theme of this game? Like, holy shit. And I think that the game leans more towards optimism, though that is me possibly projecting, because I am kind of an optimist myself. And there's nothing wrong with being a pessimist, though there can be negative consequences of being pessimistic. But there are also negative consequences of being optimistic, too. I mean, look at Roman's gambling addiction. This game's all different shades of gray, which I love. And then that leads to the ending, which I believe that the ending is a choice between optimism and pessimism. I wrote this really long forum post on the GTA forums, and I'm going to read it out loud here. It's pretty crazy. Holy crap. You know what? I might actually not read this. This is so huge. I might put it in the description, to be honest with you. It's crazy how long that is. And my voice is starting to hurt. So, basically, I used to think that the revenge ending was better. It's kind of funny. When I first played this game, I picked the revenge ending, thought it was kind of anticlimactic. Then I came back, became a cynical, depressed prick, and thought that the deal ending was better because I thought that the sadder ending was more fitting. Then I thought the revenge ending was better, again, because I thought it was the more optimistic ending. Then I realized that the deal ending was better, again, because I think that that's the more optimistic ending. So let me explain. Kate... You follow Kate's advice in the revenge ending. Kate is the pessimist. You kill Dimitri out of pure revenge, which is kind of what this game has all been about. This game has been kind of a message against revenge, about how revenge is bad, and you follow your vengeful, your lust for revenge after killing Darko, or not killing Darko. Killing Darko and feeling empty inside and feeling even worse, or not killing Darko because you realize that it didn't mean anything and that revenge is pointless. So, I think that revenge is just kind of the pessimistic ending, even though the result is happier because Roman survives as kind of a weird twist of fate. Niko is more negative in the game, in the ending. I feel like Niko doesn't really change much as a character at the end. He's kind of the same, you know, and he fucks with Jimmy P before he kills him. He laughs in his face before he kills him. Like, he turns into a monster. He kind of realizes how much of a monster he is at the end there, when he says, like, what have I become, kind of, more or less. Kind of paraphrasing that, but... Then you get the deal ending, which is about basically giving Dimitri the benefit of the doubt and trying to do a deal with him. And you get the more negative ending. And it's the ending that Roman prefers, too. And Roman's the optimist, right? Roman text messages you and says, like, get the money, dude. We'll spend the money, go to Miami and vacation. It'll be great. We'll live happily ever after. You know, it's the optimist. It's the optimist thing. Like, people may criticize greed, like, oh, it's greedy, but, you know, at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of good things that you can do with money. Whether it's for personal happiness or for happiness of other people, too. So, yeah, and I think that one of the reasons why I prefer the deal ending, other than what I just mentioned about it feeling like a better climax, because the final battle with Dimitri is better, and the conclusion of Dimitri's character, like, Dimitri's character arc feels complete. But other than that, you know, I think deal ending is better because Niko changes. In the revenge ending, Niko just kind of argues with Roman more. Like, continues to argue with Roman and, like, pushes him even after Kate dies. And it's just, I don't know, like, he argues with Roman. He blames himself for Kate and gets just kind of mad. He kind of just throws, like, a pissy fit over it. And it just seems like he's just going to become more insular and angry, like Kate said, in the revenge ending. Though it is possible that you'll still get a happy ending with revenge. I think that they're both endings that maybe lean more towards optimism at the end of the day. But the deal ending, even though it's more tragic, it's like that tragedy pulls Niko out. Because Niko says, he admits fully, like, he says, I let this happen. Roman's death is my fault. Everything bad that happened, this is my fault, and I will own up to this. I will not let revenge destroy me again. I am going to be honest with myself and not make excuses anymore. Forgive me, because I don't have the quote. I'll put the quote in the description. But that quote was so powerful to me. That quote that Niko has fully come to terms with himself, that he knows that he did wrong and that this is his fault, and he is accepting it. and not whining about it. Like, oh, maybe if the bombs didn't blow up at my village, maybe I would have been okay. Like, no, none of that. He is fully accepting of it. He is accepting of himself and his failures, and he admits it. And that is powerful, in my opinion. And that's why that ending is so great. And I love the... Roman didn't hurt anyone. And he looks away. And then little Jacob, loyal to the end, says, "It's okay, man. You won. You won." Niko looks back, kind of this blank look, and then the music plays, and then the camera cuts up. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Now, it's not a very satisfactory ending. It's satisfying in the way that it's kind of open-ended, and you can kind of use your imagination as to what happened, but it's sort of, it kind of leaves things open. It's one of those, it's a trade-off ending. It's not, you don't get a full epilogue or something, but you get to kind of make up your mind of what happened. I think, personally, how I feel that with Roman's death, it left an open spot for the son or the daughter with the revenge ending, the son with the deal ending, that would be left behind through Mallory. Mallory was going to have a son in the deal ending, and Niko promises that he will not let anything bad happen, that kid will have nothing to worry about. And that's a great moment. And she says, a kid with a father has a lot to worry about. I think Niko would take over as a father role, and I think Niko became an optimist to fill in the hole that Roman left behind. Roman is gone. It leaves a hole. Niko has to fill that hole for this kid. And he has to be a better person. He has to man up. He has to take responsibility. This game is about maturity. This is why this game resonated with me so much in high school when I was depressed, because this game is about responsibility in the end. And I think that, this game is about a lot of things. I can't really centralize it on one theme other than optimism and pessimism. There's so many themes running through this bitch. But I think that growing up is a big part of it. And in many ways, as much of a man-child as Roman was at times, I think in many ways he was more of a grown-up than Niko was. And some of the other characters like Packie and Dwayne. So that's it. That's most of what I have to say about this game. I have a few last things. The radio stations. I wanted to mention the music, Yeah, so the music, Concrete Jungle. The lyrics in Concrete Jungle, "No sun will shine in my day today. Darkness has covered my light. Hope has changed," or hope is, I don't remember the line specifically. But, he's trapped in this concrete jungle. I have to keep my feet on the ground. There are no chains around my feet, but I am not free. Those lines are so perfect in how they describe this game with this story. Rat Race, also great. Look up the lyrics for that. Satisfy My Soul, I think is great. It's a beautiful song. It's about finding satisfaction in things. It's about finding your happiness. Pimper's Paradise, it's about a tragic person that fell to the manipulation of others. Liberty Rock Radio, I could turn you inside out, but I choose not to. Niko has to show a lot of restraint in the story of not killing people. He has to work for people. Niko hates being a slave. That's the other thing. Niko's a Slav, which I've heard, I could be wrong about this, but I've heard Slav comes from slave, or slave comes from Slav. That's important. That's important to Niko's character. Niko's ethnicity is important to his character, because Niko does not want to be chained. Niko says it himself. Like, when Kate asks him, "What do you want in life? What do you want to be? What is the meaning of life to you?" And Niko says, "I want to make the right decisions, and I want them to be my decisions to make. I don't want to be anyone's slave." And that says everything about him. So I could turn you inside out. Beautiful. Perfect. One vision. Perfect. It sums up the bait and switch. One man, one goal, one mission. Look what they did to my dreams, All those lines it all sums up this character. It all sums up this, it sums up all this story, you know, the events. All of that. Thug, self-explanatory. Can't keep my nose clean, living in sin. Love that song. The bass line with it is just beautiful. It just adds to the atmosphere of the city. You know, like the bass of this game, you know, it's got a good, like, Seinfeld kind of bassy sound. Like, there's a lot of great songs on both the Vibe with, like, the R&B and the soul, and on Liberty Rock with, like, good bass. And I love bass. Bass is awesome, and it just adds to the atmosphere. This world is incredible. It feels so alive. You know, you can eat, you can take the train, you can do all this stuff, and the music makes it feel lived in even more, and it just complements it so well. Jailbreak, also self-explanatory, kind of a criminal song. Street Kids, same thing, you know, self-explanatory. The Street Kids, you know, I think of Packie. 1979 reminds me of Packie as well, and the McCreary family in general, but especially Packie. The Vibe, you know, Inner City Blues sums up a lot of things. You know, it's great atmosphere. I just recommend looking up that song. It's a great song. Footsteps in the Dark. I love to play that song before the last mission, because it's about, like, should I go forward or turn back? You know, it's great. Like, whenever you're going to make a big decision in the story, I feel like Footsteps in the Dark is a great song for that. Look that song up. It's amazing. The Vibe consists of mostly atmospheric music, like I mentioned. It just fits beautifully with the tone of New York City. The Journey, also pure atmosphere. Definitely a prologue or a prelude to GTA 5, you know, and Self-Actualization is great too. They both serve a perfect purpose of being amazingly atmospheric, and GTA 5 did it incredibly well with the Tangerine Dream soundtrack in GTA 5. Vladivostok, San Juan, and Massive B are all great. I didn't think I would like foreign music that had a language that I didn't even speak, but I love those stations. I think that those bits of music are great. You know, all those songs are great. I listen to them even when I'm not playing GTA 4 sometimes. The music makes the drive-bys feel much more intense. Especially Massive B really enhances that. The Kino song is very fitting with Niko's character. It's a great song. So is King Ring, because it's all about being a fighter and a survivor. Niko is a survivor. Another thing that Niko and Kate relate on is that they're both survivors. They literally say that in the story. Just because, you know, I forgot to mention that. I might as well throw that in there. All the other stations in passing, you know, just JNR is incredible. Fusion is awesome. Both awesome jazz music. K109, the studio, is good. They're all great. The DLC music is great too. I could just go on and on. Honestly, just look up that music. It's incredible. It's just amazing. So just look that up. Last stuff. Conclusion. Okay, so the criticisms of this game. I get the criticisms because San Andreas had all of these awesome features, and GTA 4 had to really kind of cut it back. Because they couldn't just one-up San Andreas. What are they going to do? Add, you know, San Andreas had 3 cities. What are they going to do? Add 5 cities? Like, and all the mini games and stuff. Like, some of that stuff in San Andreas wasn't great. Some of it wasn't very well thought out. So they had to pull back with 4 and just focus on making a great story. I love it for that, but fans at the time felt kind of betrayed. I understand where the fans are coming from, and I feel like I have to almost apologize for the game for that reason. Other flaws, the driving, the shooting, you know, there are pros and cons to both. You either love them or you hate them. The repetitive friend activities get a little bit annoying. I think that the game's a little bit too long at times, and there's too many missions. But some of that, I think, works because Niko as a character has to deal with those things, you know, like the sort of breaking down of this character, the repetitiveness of the missions, almost like the player feeling with this character. Like that, I think that adds to it. I think the repetitive mission design at the end, I hate to defend bad game design or repetitive game design, but I think it almost complements the story. The DLC is awesome. I already mentioned that. Last things I have to say, man, this game, I want to talk about the political commentary a little bit. I think that the political commentary is great, but I think it's all just kind of joking. I don't think that this game tells you to be a communist, an anarchist, or an objectivist, capitalist. I don't think this game tells you anything like that. I think this game is all about morals. This is a moral commentary disguised as a political one. You can read into the political stuff if you want. You know, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. If you want to read into this game as more of a political commentary because that's the way you prefer to view it, then that's totally fine. I wouldn't want to stop you. But personally, I view it more as a moral commentary disguised as a political one. Though the political stuff is fantastic. It's very South Parky. I love the sense of humor that this game has. I love laughing at America. I love America. I'm American. But, and I am kind of patriotic, but, you know, I love laughing at America too. So that's it, you know, that's this game. It's incredible. This is an incredible game. I love this game. I don't know if I would give it a 10 out of 10 because of the flaws that I just mentioned, but, man, if I was reviewing this game back in the day, man, screw it. I would give this game a 10, I feel like. This game is an amazing game, and I highly recommend you play it. The PC version has its flaws, but I still think it's better than the console version. The console version has some problems with performance, but it's still playable. I've played all versions. I've played the PS3 version, the 360 version, the PC version. I've put over 1,000 hours on Steam into this game, and even more than that. Well, not more than that, but, you know, it adds up. You know, if I add in the console versions too, it adds to even more. So I have well over 1,000 hours in this game. I know, no life, sorry. I don't have a job, forgive me. Yeah, just play this game, man. It's the best $10 I've ever spent in my life. If it was $10. It might have been even 5 or 7. It's amazing. This is an incredible game, and I cannot recommend it enough. GTA 5, I guess the last things I'll say about GTA 5, it's a great game, but I don't think it captures what this game was. This game was truly special, and I will always come back to this game. It'll always be my game. This is my game. It's personal to me. This is my video game. This is why it's my favorite. I can come back to this game and I feel at home. When I get in my car, when I get in like a Dodge Charger and 1979 starts playing and I'm driving around in Queens and I'm talking to Packie, I'm talking to Kate, I'm talking to the friends, you know, like, I'm getting to know people, and I get this awesome story about almost like philosophy and the meaning of life. It's just amazing, and it'll always be amazing, and I'll never let go of it. And here we are, end of the line. Grand Theft Auto 4. It is a masterpiece, in my opinion.
You remember me?
Pussy me, не познаем te. I don't know you.
Yes, you do. I'm the one who survived.
Niko. Hello.
Reci mi zašto?
Zašto?
Zato što smo bili prijatelji. Svi smo odrasli zajedno. Mitar, Dragan, Goran, Mio. Mogu da nastavim. Sviju, a?
We were friends, but I am never friends. Friends that Goran and his guys killed. My fucking neighbors. Because of what? Because of shit. Lies. Fucking lies.
So that makes it okay to stab your friends in the back?
Everything you believe is shown to be shit. You make strange choices.
Fuck you! Strange choices? How much?
1,000.
You killed my friends for $1,000.
How much do you charge to kill someone?
You ruined me, you fuck!
I needed the money. I had problems.
You're a fucking junkie!
Kill me then! You fucking hypocrite. Trust me. You're doing me a favor. Ah!
Niko, come on. Let's go. Let him suffer. He knows what he did. He doesn't look like he enjoys life too much. Come on.
We should go, Niko. You've seen what happened to me.
Where am I? What is this place? You say I ruined you? You were always the killer. I just helped you see that. I'm lost.